Right, man, so I'm just going to throw together this quick tutorial to go over how I'm painting these shots for 39 steps. So I guess mainly going to cover composition, colouring and texture, I suppose, are the most important bits. So let's get started. I'll open up a DA sized image. I guess start off just with a sort of rough sketch. I haven't used this software before, so it might be a bit slow, but you know, I'll just kind of roughly go make something up, I guess. You notice that the environments I've been sort of painting for this game are deliberately quite stylized. I mean, Scotland's a pretty interesting looking place, but it's sure as hell not as dramatic throughout as we're implying in this, but that was very deliberate. I really wanted the environment to kind of match Hanny's own feelings throughout the game, so you'll see, like, in when he's in London, everything's very dreary, very sort of washed out, lots of sort of kind of uncomfortable colours in the palette and stuff like that. It's not very pleasant. It's raining a lot, and he does obviously mention that in the book, but I don't know, I just kind of wanted to play with that concept a bit. So yeah, this is just going to be a general Scotland shot. We've got some mountains and stuff, a river, sure, why not. This isn't actually a shot from the book, but I mean, obviously it could be. And a bit of foreground here. One very good way to sort of quickly test your shot once you've got something like this, I mean, this is obviously hella rough, I would advise spending a bit more time on the actual design. But compositionally, already you can see that our eye is going to be kind of running through the piece. That's something you really want to get strongly, is having a sense of flow. So this, like, river takes us in, these mountains pull us into the center, that, you know, so we kind of run into the picture, and we can enhance this obviously by having the levels the way we want. So from a pure value point of view, what we're going to do is, you know, a very classic way to structure your values is to have your dark saturated colors in the foreground, so that'd be here, and then as atmosphere it enters the scene, it builds that. So you're going to have, you know, I don't know why I chose to use a big stupid airbrush, but you know, let's say our sky is quite light. You know, you can already start to see where the stuff that's closer will be, and of course we can mimic that with the water. Anyway, so that would be kind of vaguely our how we structure our values, I guess. It's a very common illustrative technique, but you know, it works for what we're doing with this project. I mean, very much the goal with 39 Steps is that everything just reads. There's no like crazy stuff going on, you know, in terms of design. Anyway, so yeah, so we've got our thing down. Now I'll actually colour it properly. So yeah, you can work straight into colour if you wish. For this project in particular, I've been doing a lot of sorry, I'm trying out some new brushes actually, and I'm really liking them, but I keep forgetting what the hell everything is. Yeah, you can work straight into colour if that's how you like to work. What I've been doing here though is just for pure speed, roughing it out in grayscale, then separating the layers, then colouring them. I mean, obviously do it the way that makes sense to you, but like, for example, this way, I mean, in theory this whole painting should take, you know, half an hour. I'd like to be done. You know, I want this tutorial to be quite quick, so you can very quickly grasp like why I'm doing it this way. We spoke about brushes a wee bit. I personally like to use brushes that mimic real life paint because I come from a traditional painting background. I don't work on layers particularly, unless I'm doing matte painting. Obviously for this project there are layers, but generally you'll rarely see me work at more than 3 layers maybe, usually just 1 or 2. See, I'm just trying to build up some interest here. This part's receding a little here, you can see, so it will have more atmosphere. I don't know how much you've studied light and stuff, but obviously atmosphere is just, you know, when things recede, the more atmosphere there is in the environment, the more the lighter things become, the less saturated they become. And quite often in landscapes, in environments, you'll see that when it recedes into blue because of the, I guess, the colour of the sky and all that sort of malarkey. Definitely worth reading up on your colour theory if it's something you're interested in, because it's incredibly useful. Drinking my coffee. This is just you know, a sort of general environment. There's no house or anything like that. You know, if there's going to be a thing which the eye is meant to be focusing on, then we might spend a wee bit longer on it. But yeah, in this case, it's really quite straightforward. Trying to think of stuff to say while I'm doing this. Certainly a very good thing to do is just to study landscapes, obviously, and go out and paint, you know, outside and everything like that. It's always useful. You will build up like a nice internal set of images that you can sort of call upon whenever you need them. So hopefully by now it's starting to read reasonably well. You'll have seen obviously that we use a lot of layers in a matte painting style with this project, because it does actually allow us to do sort of, you know, all the cool camera effects and stuff, which is fun. So I mean, very much pay attention to like having cool things in the foreground, which, you know, like a vine apparently. have some vines in the foreground. You know, stuff in the foreground will help sell that this is a 3D landscape and not a 2D image, you know. Another general tip is, you know, whether you're working on this project or anything really, try and think about not just the values, but also the hardness and softness of what you're drawing. Like right now, everything here is quite hard. I'm really just working with this one brush, which, if I show you, is, oops, you know, it's got this lovely, yeah, papery sort of texture. But if I was, or later on, I'll probably show you a good way to make your images interesting is to think about like hard edges, relatively soft ones, and then, you know, full-on soft edges. If you have a full range of these in your picture, it'll become a lot more believable, because obviously the world isn't simply constructed out of charcoal. Yeah, so, oh yeah, flip your canvas, you know, classic technique. Very good way to very quickly see if your image is working or if it's total crap. I can already see from doing that that actually this composition is boring as hell. But, you know, it's just a landscape. Okay, so we're actually almost done layering in the values. You can see how, I mean, I don't know how long this has been, 10 minutes or something, and I've already kind of, in my mind I understand where everything is now. This all kind of makes sense to me. I might maybe just make this more dramatic here, maybe. Watch out for tangents as well. I was kind of repeating the shape of that mountain there a wee bit too much. I'm just going to start drawing over the lines I made. I don't always sketch first, and if I do, I'll usually do it on paper, but obviously this is just a quick demo, so why not, eh? Obviously having a Cintiq is very useful for this sort of stuff, because you can get that line control down, which you just don't get with a Wacom, a regular Wacom tablet, whatever the hell it's called. Let's have this area in a bit more shadow, I think. Obviously think about your light sources when you're doing this. You can have a lot of bounced light in an environment like this, so expect there to be some kind of slightly weird stuff going on. I'm going to deal with the water later. Stuff like that, the effects sort of stuff comes right at the end, really. Another way that I quite often do mountains is to use the lasso tool, whatever the hell it's called. You'll see that technique used very commonly in concept art, because suddenly you've got this beautiful crisp edge that you can just, you know, slap on. Right, so I'm pretty happy with, you know, where this is going right now, so let us start to separate out these layers a bit. Now again, if you prefer, you could of course just start immediately with, I better save this, to test. You can start off immediately working, you know, on your layers. Oops, daisy. Probably don't need that, but why not? So, you know, if you prefer to work like that, you could, you know, say, right, I'm going to draw my sky on this layer with some clouds, and then I'm gonna, you know, start doing. But obviously, you don't have the kind of the gift of foresight. If you do that, you don't really know where it's gonna go. I think it's always better to prepare if you can, and one way to do that obviously is to sketch first, because then you know exactly what is going on. Right, let's just extend this over a bit actually. Again, it's all about how the eye flows through the image, and it just wasn't really very interesting at the time. Right, so we got our stuff down. Time to separate out those layers. Now, obviously, again, take your time with this sort of stuff, but for this demo, it doesn't really matter that much. I'm just literally going to go sky. There it is, copy and paste it, delete it from the original. I'll keep the original just for so we can look at it later. Yep, so there's our sky. I'm going to take these background mountains. Guess I could take this this as one layer. Yeah, why not? So then the main bit. Oops. And then the foreground, and then just assemble them in the correct order. So foreground first, then behind that you're going to have the this bit, and behind this you're going to have these, and then the sky at the back. So that's our layers set up, and we can name them if you want to. So have this as foreground, midground, background, sky. So at this stage already we've got something that's workable within the within Unity. Like you could put these on layers and move them around, and it would all be tickety-boo. Now the next stage I will do is I'll start working from back to front. So the sky will just take this. If I'd done a better sky I would have kept that, but you know, why not? I'm just doing this quickly. So let's just say our sky is going to look like keeping it painty, keeping it interesting to look at. This isn't, you know, photoreal by any stretch of the imagination. It's not meant to be, you know. It's meant to look like a painting. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, so there's the sky. Here's this little background bit. So again, just extend it so that it can move around in space. Now we're going to start bringing in texture here. The way we work texture, probably already said it, is the areas you want the viewer to focus on will always have the most texture or the most drama. In this case, there isn't a focal point, it's just a standard environment. So we make the foreground the focal point for this, focal point even. Let's just make these hills a bit kind of more interesting shaped. So I'm just starting to use a couple of texture brushes here just to give it a bit more interest. Not heavily textured, but you know, enough that it breaks up the forms. Again, using the lasso tool is very handy for interesting formations and such. I'm just going to chuck in a black background here so I can kind of see what I'm doing. There we go. And you can see I'm starting to use some soft brushes here as well, just to give it that range of texture like I was saying before. Let's bring in some lighter rocks here. Cool, quite happy with that, that's fine. The more we extend outwards, the more this can be moved within the scene. And thus the more sort of dramatic stuff you can get by. Again, it kind of depends on how long this is going to be on the screen for. If it's on the screen for about 2 seconds, there's probably no point. But if it might be on the screen for, you know, a minute while the camera moves around, then it's worth putting in the extra detail. So you can kind of see how that works. So there's our background, now our midground. I'm not going to bother properly painting this up because that would take ages. I'll just do give it a fairly quick once over. Quite fond of this brush, gives you a nice unusual scattering. Just delete all this stuff. This this bit of mountain there probably should be in the background, but I introduced it late, so now I can't really be bothered moving it. just get this bit mapped in here. Go back. When it comes to using these brushes, you'll very quickly find ones that you sort of gravitate towards. Even though I, for most work, primarily use a single set, which is Whit Bracknell's ones, which I'll send you. For stuff like this, having a range that allows you to, get down a lot of forms quickly is so useful. These are mats from conceptart.org, and they're just so nice for just throwing down shapes, especially for things like rocky outcrops and stuff. We can treat this water similarly to the rest of the environment and worry about stuff like the actual reflections, if there are any, and stuff like that at the last phase, really. So you'll notice again, there's quite a lot of texture going on here, but it's not, none of it's photo yet. It's just stuff to kind of build the, give it depth. It's not literally taking photo textures. We will do some of that, certainly, and that bit is mega fun, but I generally reserve that for foreground stuff. As soon as you've got a realistic texture in a foreground, and there's texture in the background and everywhere else, you trick the mind quite well into believing that everything at a glance is texture and everything is real. Early on in the project we had 3D trees in the foreground of some scenes, and it was kind of ace to see how effectively it tricked the brain into thinking that you were looking at a 3D image, because your brain sort of picked out details, and then just went, oh okay, I guess it's all 3D then, because brains are stupid. And if that's the lesson for today. game soundtracks and film soundtracks end up playing quite a large part of my audio library when it comes to painting. There's definitely nothing better than getting something suitably epic to get you in the mood to paint something. And as corny as it seems, I will quite often put on music that relates in some way to the project I'm working on. So if I'm doing a big sci-fi piece, I might chuck on, I don't know, Blade Runner or the Tron soundtrack. It's totally lame, but it does help. So this brush that I'm using at the moment is this is Whit's. This is the brush set, as I said before, that I use the most. I think it has phenomenal brush choices, and they feel so nice, and they look so nice and painty, which is hella cool. Just watch those levels. Jeez, I'm going to chuck some rocks into this little lake here. Again, just grab the lasso tool. One day I will say it correctly. Just sort of make some stupid shapes. The advantage of doing this goes back to what I was saying about having a multitude of texture in your work. Having this set up, we can quickly put down quite rough and ready shapes, and then have the area that isn't selected be very smooth, and then you get that kind of nice blend that I was talking about. So what I mean by that is grab a brush that is nice and rocky or something like that, like this. Again, obviously stuff that's further away is going to be less textured than the front stuff. And of course these rocks will have light on them and everything, as with everything else. And then invert that, paint everything else in quite with a softer brush. Get some nice rocks. I'm going to use something like this, which is a very sort of interesting texture brush here to just give a bit more detail to this foreground. That'll do for now. Looks vaguely like water or something. Let's see how this is matching up. Sky. Now's a good time to start looking at the whole thing and start to see where you might want some more atmosphere, say in here, just to separate those out a bit more. Same here, just a bit more in here. Separate those planes a bit more. Okay. Let's just add a bit more lightness in here. Right, now here's another brush I'm going to give you. Let's do Gin. Has a lot of really great foliage textures that I use a lot. Now these sort of things only really go into foregrounds or areas that are quite close to the camera. So I'm just going to use this here, really. Spend a bit more time over this. Oops, that'll do for that. Here. The rock in this is kind of spoiling the composition a bit. Get rid of it. Get out of here. Okay, so we have all of our components. It reads fairly well. Nothing's too detailed. So the next thing to do is colouring. Now again, now that we've gone through all of this, that's been what, 45 minutes, 40 minutes? I don't know, not too long, but that's the worst, so the hardest part done. So now for colouring, there's a zillion ways you could do this. One of the most common I use would be to set a layer above the sky layer, for example, Hold down Alt. If you click in this middle bit, it'll attach it to that, so it means you can't paint outside of this. Now colour tends to be quite direct, quite strong. In this case we could probably get away with it. The alternative, which I use more commonly, is to give it a base colour, but not to be too saturated, and then add another layer on top of that, and actually paint properly on a soft light layer. I just find this kind of gives me more control. Colour is a good tool, but it will quite often just totally blow out your images in a way you don't necessarily want, and then you can just paint directly on if you need to. So that's the sky, it's not exactly a challenge. And then just work my way through them. So select the next one, same again, colour. It's going to be quite it's quite far in the distance, so it's going to have a lot of atmosphere, which means it's going to be quite blue. So the blue becomes the base colour, and then with the soft light layer. You could also use an overlay layer. Don't be afraid to sort of mix and match. I just find the soft light gives the best blend of intensity and softness. And again, things in the background, there's not going to be a lot of detail, so don't worry too much. And you can see now why I haven't put loads and loads of effort into texturing, because at this stage you would kind of lose a lot of that. So then I can start going in and adding a bit more where it's necessary. Like this bit here, it might be nice if it was a bit greener actually. So yeah, all this stuff is so iterative. I mean, don't be afraid to go back and completely change something if you weren't too happy with how it was working out. And of course remember the other stuff. So yeah, soft light, color layers, just use a variety of blend modes and just kind of get the effect you're looking for. And just try to bear in mind that stuff in the background is going to be less saturated than stuff in the foreground. But we can mess with that stuff later with a bit of color correction and all that jazz. Midground. Now we're getting into actual color here, so let's choose a suitable base color. Now there are other ways to do this. Another way that I quite often use is to apply, I'm just going to duplicate this so I can undo it if I hate it. So I can apply my color layer like we did before, at quite a low saturation. And then we bring up the color balance tool. It can be quite nice to start your basic balancing here with, you know, a bit of yellow, midtones, let's up the green and red a little bit. You know, that just gives you a nice sort of basis to work from that's a bit more dramatic than that. Maybe I'll end up like, you know, combining the two to get a sort of, this is my base color here, my base coat. Then I can go in with my soft light layer and, you know, bring a bit more blue in here. Get these shadows in correctly in these sort of lighter areas. There's no one way to do this at all. So it's very worth experimenting a bit and finding what makes the most sense for you. I realise I am continuously repeating myself, but bear in mind that for commercial illustrations and stuff, or anything where you have a bit more time, this isn't not the best. Sorry, it really is not the best way to color, because you actually end up changing your values a great deal. It's more for speed's sake. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend painting like this for everything. Certainly, getting your greys down first and then working on top of it is very valid and quite a useful technique, especially for someone like me, because if I don't do that, I'll quite often just make stupid mistakes in the composition, as anyone would really. So it is useful to, working in grayscale, you can almost sort of turn your brain off a wee bit, or I find I can. You can see even in this sort of pretty quick time, this is at least reading correctly at the moment. So sort out the water. Don't be afraid to be quite bold in some areas. Now that I have my palette figured out, I can start to just use the colours that I have here and just work with them solely. So that'll keep everything quite tight. Sort of, a constrained colour palette always works best because you're not over exposing the viewer to just everything under the sun. Colourful palettes are great, but just work with what you have after a certain point. Right now I have enough of a value range already on my canvas that I can start to just sort of pick from whatever I want, really. A bit of this here and there. And that'll keep it quite concise. I don't know what these are, but let's just get something interesting in here. Some more shapes, some more forms. Now you'll also notice that I'm almost never zoom in, and that's something I do in my own work as well, my personal work as well. It's just, I don't really want to think about all the details. The details aren't really important in this. The reason I'm working in this style at all is because I wanted it to be quite atmospheric and quite moody and get the point across, but not be too detailed. Getting bogged down with detail is no fun. So yeah, I almost exclusively work at 30, 20% or whatever throughout the process. I'll zoom in certainly in pieces that need detail, but this just helps me keep a sort of clear head, I guess. I still haven't used any texture at this stage, but we're getting to the part where that will come in. Basically, once everything is looking pretty tight already, we can start thinking about using photo texture. You don't need to do it specifically, but I think, as I said before, right at the end, you can kind of lift up the piece a little bit more if you use texture, subtly preferably. Right, I just had to take a break there because this program decided to just go absolutely nuts. Right, we're on to the most fun bit of all. It's time to get some texture into this. So, what we're using texture here for is really just to bring out some of the detail here. We could, if we spent another hour on this, I probably would spend another hour on this, or at least half an hour more, just to tidy this up. Because right now, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if my mouse is showing up. Right now, you know, all this stuff here is just so loose. You know, there's very little detail. If you spent half an hour, you know, detailing this out, making everything look really pretty, you'd get a much more interesting picture all overall. But we don't have that much time necessarily. So here are some high-res images of Scotland, which I don't own. I just grabbed them off Google for the purposes of this presentation. But before we started this project, we actually, Simon and I, went out and shot a lot of photography around Scotland for this use. So I'm just going to give you a kind of example of how we might use this. So this here, for example, I've chosen this image because there's a lot of layering going on here, lots of interesting stuff going on here. So, oops, we can open this up and have a look at it in context. You see all this lovely detail and how it recedes into the horizon. It's just beautiful. So what we're going to do is straight up steal it, or at least take it and apply it in a way that will be meaningful to our painting. So I'm just going to basically resize it so that the key area is, you know, is around here. That's kind of what I want. There's a lot of experimentation with this stage. Let's put it above the right layer for a start, because honestly, you don't really know how this is going to come out. And I'm just going to take the levels and just lighten it up a wee bit, give it a bit more contrast. And then what we can do is just play around, check how it looks as an overlay, check how it looks as a soft light layer. Now, one thing we never ever do, or I have never ever do, is just to simply apply something straight up like that. You always want to have complete control over what you're doing. In this case, I mean, to be fair, it's not adding a great deal, which is slightly annoying. I was kind of hoping it would do more. But what we can do is we could actually up the saturation a bit, bring it more in line with what we've got elsewhere in the image, and then applying a layer mask, like I've done before, we can actually see how this will work painted directly in. Now, this is something I very, very rarely do, but you know, it's worth experimenting a bit to see what gives you the result you're looking for. So let's just have a quick peek and see if we can get anything from just gently applying this texture. Traditionally, we would be using a layer mask of a blending mode of some kind, like our soft light. But you know, sometimes you might get a cool effect from doing this, and maybe you'll see something you didn't think of. Either way, you're giving it more detail. I'm not really sure if this is what I'm wanting, to be quite honest. It's not terrible. Get that road in there. We don't want that road in there. Okay, so there's a bit going on there. Let's just grab another one, shall we? Here we have some pretty epic mountains. So this is a good example. Let's bring this in. Flip it over. Oops. Oh, shit, let's do it over. Flip it over. Get it into our image. And this one should work quite nicely as a soft light layer. Because what it's going to do is just give us some interesting texture to apply to our mountain. So we can stretch, resize it, you know, get it to where we want it. Interestingly, that actually fits in with what I'd imagined the tops of this mountain to look like, with these little area here, the colour. I want to lighten this up a little bit. Then again, mask it out, paint it in yourself. So yeah, that just sort of gives it a little bit more definition. And when it comes to working with texture, always do it for a reason. You know, don't just go slumming textures in left, right, and center when you don't necessarily need them. That ultimately had quite a subtle effect, but you know, I kind of like it. I'm going to do the same sort of thing over here with the same texture. Don't be afraid to reuse textures. No one's going to notice because we are painting them in. This isn't simply chucking it in there, this is actually using our brains and thinking about where we want this texture to lie. You see, I'm keeping it quite subtle again as we recede into the background. It's kind of nice how you end up with things like that, like this little extra ridge here. It's quite cool. I don't know if I necessarily want it, but textures are a really great way to just think of or end up with things you might not have necessarily thought of yourself. So I quite often experiment with textures that have nothing to do with the actual piece itself. So yeah, this is just giving us more form in this area here. It's a bit of a mess, not gonna lie. But once we've solidified these textures and got them where we want them, we can then start painting into them to really start integrating them into the piece. See, I really like these rocks here, so I'm going to see if I can get some of those in. It's really cool. So again, you know, just be bold about it. See what you can get away with, what interests you can add to your piece. Again, I'm just going to, before I even do anything, I'm just going to incorporate it a bit more into the palette of the piece. And you know, with this, again, let's just try straight up adding it in, painting it in softly and see what it gives us. Maybe it'll have quite a cool effect. You never know until you give it a shot. And changes like this are going to affect my color palette and might actually give me extra, something extra that we can work with. You don't need to do any of this stuff, to be honest. The piece was pretty much done as it was, but you know, if you've spent an hour and you feel like spending a little bit more time, don't be afraid to just mess around a bit and see what you can come up with. It is actually kind of cool. I'm not going to keep it, but it is kind of cool. You can see how it's given us this extra ridge here. I mean, that's pretty rad, isn't it? Obviously it's not in keeping with the actual piece. But no, I don't want to really mess up what I've been working on for the last hour. So let's just see with a soft light, let's get a bit more, use those textures to just give us a bit more of a realistic feel. It's a bit too dark. Can fix that later though. Anything else that's fun to play with? Oh, we could use this. We could use this just to do a quick water pass, actually. Why not? Let's get rid of that foreground thing. It's kind of getting in the way. And don't expect to be super fast when you start out, you know. The speed thing will come. It just takes a bit longer. You know, it just takes getting comfortable with your skill sets. And with, you know, figuring out how you like to work. And one method that I use might work for you, whereas, you know, certain things might not work at all for you. Certainly, one of the ways I taught myself was to watch all the tutorials, which is really great, and sort of try and emulate the artists. But I think I made the mistake of relying too much on like trying to find cool brushes and stuff. And obviously, you can see I use a lot of them for this work. But honestly, it's the core skills that are important, not any of that stuff. These are just tools, just the things to help us. Okay, anything else I can get from these? I'm not using them too much. I can do something in the foreground, because obviously this is the area that should be most detailed. So, let's have a look in the old library. So worth having a well fleshed out library of textures. Unfortunately, I haven't sorted through it in quite a while, so it's a bit of a mess. So here's one. It's not exactly accurate to what we're painting, but that doesn't matter. So again, just get it to where you want it, and then have a play. See what works for you. I can see that's kind of nice, even though it's very very hard and slightly over the top. It's actually got quite a nice effect. And again, just receding slightly as you move away to give it the illusion of depth. Okay, so we've got it at this stage. Okay, everything's a bit more detailed. To show you the difference here, this is what we had before. Oops, this is what we had before, and this is it with the texture. So it's just a bit more detail here. So I'm just going to flatten these down a bit. Again, keeping a minimal number of layers here. What the hell is this? Get out of here. So now that we've got our texture in place, the last stage really, stages are just cleaning it up and color correcting it. We've spent, you know, just over an hour thereabouts on this now. I'm going to get rid of that bit there because it's really distracting me. So yeah, just go in and sort of make little changes here and there. It's probably going to be a bit better. You know, look at the big picture. See which bits need to be, like this area here. This area here could be lightened up a little bit. You know, these bits could be defined more. So at this stage, all the information is there. So now it's just a case of going in and going, right, what can I improve on? Like, could I take this foreground? Obviously needs a lot more work because it's not very detailed. Maybe I'll spend 10 minutes making this look really, really good. You know, take this rock, really go to town on this rock. Because, you know, it's right there, so why not? you know, and get some more of that nice grass texture in, or wherever the hell that is, or something different. Or add some, you know, variety here and here. So this is kind of the fun part. This is the bit when you can just turn off your brain and sketch and just have fun with it, and not worry too much about. You don't have to worry about the composition; it's all there. You have to worry about color; it's all there. It's just a case of taking what you've done and just cleaning it up a bit, you know. Go in there. Now, I'm not actually going to bother doing the cleanup because that would take, you know, as I say, another hour. But you get the idea. And then the final phase, after you've done all that, imagine I've made this look 1,000 times better, is just to look at it as a whole and think about effects, for example. So a nice way to get a nice reflection would be to select this as a whole, copy the entire thing, so Control-Shift, copy, paste it, and then just drag it over. And then again, because I never just do stuff like that, it has to be painted in. We do our alpha mask, take it out, and then paint it in the way we want it. So let's just use the white and paint in that reflection. Sorry, that stupid rock in a bit. If you want to push this back a little further and add more atmosphere, grab your sky tone and just on a layer above everything else, just start painting in that extra atmosphere. Not worrying about the layers right now. I'm going a bit heavy-handed with this, but that's fine. I'll pull it back afterwards. Then we can get it to a stage where we want it, so probably about like 10% of that. Like that. That should help push it back. And then what we can do is just duplicate that and apply it to the layers separately. See what I'm doing there? It's obviously not going to affect the foreground. It's just, you know, it's going to help push everything back a bit, and sometimes it's nice to be able to do something to the entire image and then worry about the consequences afterwards. You want to do quick highlights bring out bits, use the dodge tool sparingly. The way I usually use the dodge tool is that if I'm going to dodge an area, say this midground, I'll duplicate it. And I'll paint in the dodge where I want it. Say I want to get like quite a intense sunburst there or whatever. So I'll paint it in where I want it. Again, I'm always heavy-handed deliberately when I do stuff like this, because we can bring it back later on, and again paint it in with the alpha mask. So there's some ludicrous dodge, and of course we can do some ludicrous burn as well for darker bits. Then, because we've got the backup here, we can bring that down again, or use our alpha and paint it where we want it. It's all about having control. I very rarely use the eraser, because this way I can put it in and then go, oh, actually I want a little less. You've got much more control over it. Just what you want. So yeah, I will actually do a quick dodge / burn pass on the whole thing, just to again bring it back in. See, like adding that there, that sweep of dodge is going to give us more of an impression that those mountains are receding. It's quite nice. Foreground doesn't really need much. It's already pretty OTT. You could also sharpen up with the unsharp mask the foreground and the midground, which will just give it a bit more sharpness, but don't do it for the backgrounds, you know, make it softer as it recedes. And yeah, as I said before, I'm painting at this distance, but as soon as we zoom in, you know, it's going to look pretty nuts. You can see all the different textures going on. You can see some little artifacts there that we should really have cleaned up. But really at this stage, another half hour, another 40 minutes, you'd have a pretty slick piece, which is about where all the others are. Like I say, they're about two up to 3 hours maybe for an exterior, and this was an hour and a bit. So, yep, I hope that was useful. I'll send you over some brushes. Yeah, peace.